Okay, so today we're diving into something that's causing a lot of buzz right now and could seriously shake up the political landscape in India.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Delimitation,
That's right.
redrawing the boundaries of parliamentary constituencies, state assembly constituencies, and for our listeners out there, especially if you're, deep in the world of UPSC prep,
Yeah, definitely.
this is a must-know
Absolutely crucial.
because it's tied to current affairs, to federalism, to the very foundation of our political system.
You got it. This is like a crash course on a really, really important debate.
Yeah.
And the big question is this. How might this upcoming delimitation, all driven by these decades of population shifts, how is it going to change the balance of power,
Right.
especially between the North and South?
Huge question.
Huge question. And then the other thing is, why has this been on hold for like almost 50 years?
Yeah, that's the backstory
That's the backstory.
that we need to understand.
Exactly. And those are the two things we're going to be unpacking for you today. And we're going to be looking at some top-notch analysis, particularly from the Indian Express.
So to get where we are now, we got to go back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
The Constitution. What does it say about how these seats are divvied up?
Okay.
Let's start with the Lok Sabha. Like, how is that even put together?
Okay. So Article 81.1, that's our starting point.
Okay.
It sets a cap on the number of Lok Sabha members.
Okay.
Maximum 530 elected from states and then up to 20 from the union territories.
Got it.
And right now we have 543 elected members in the Lok Sabha.
That's the big picture.
That's the big picture framework.
Okay, so we got a ceiling, but
Yeah.
then how do we decide how many of those seats each state gets?
Right.
That's where 81.2 comes in, right?
Exactly. 81.2 says the seat allocation for each state should be as proportional to its population as much as possible.
Oh.
And not just that, but also aims for like a broadly uniform ratio of population to seats across all the states.
Right.
So the idea is to make sure every citizen's vote kind of has the same weight wherever they live.
So it's fair.
It's fair.
And to keep up with all the changes happening in the country population-wise, we have Article 82, which basically says, okay, after each census, we got to reset things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the readjustment clause. It kicks in after every census.
Yep.
And now that process is handled by the Delimitation Act, which was updated in 2002.
Okay.
So theoretically, we get the new numbers from the census, and then we're supposed to redraw those constituency lines.
Right.
Maybe change the number of seats each state has in the Lok Sabha.
And for a while, that's exactly what was happening right in those early years. After independence, we actually saw delimitation in action.
Yeah, absolutely. From 1951 to 71, they were readjusting after every single census.
Wow.
So states that were growing faster, they would pick up some seats, and the ones growing slower maybe lose a few.
So it was adapting.
It was adapting, reflecting what was actually happening on the ground population-wise.
It makes sense. But then things came to a screeching halt with the 42nd Amendment during the emergency. What did that do to the whole process?
This is where things get interesting. This is crucial for UPSC folks.
Okay.
42nd Amendment, 1976. They basically froze everything.
Okay.
Seat allocation in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, all based on the 1971 census numbers.
Wow.
Said no more changes until after the 2001 census results are out.
So for like 3 decades plus, the 1971 numbers were the baseline.
Exactly.
Did the amendment itself give a clear reason for this? Like why this big pause?
That's the thing. The 42nd Amendment didn't really spell out the reasons.
Interesting.
It just said, okay, we're postponing this. No clear rationale in the document itself, which has led to a lot of different interpretations and, maybe some speculation about what the political motivations were.
Right, right.
It's something to think about when you're looking at the history of representation in India.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we fast forward to 2002 under Prime Minister Vajpayee, and we get another big development, the 84th Amendment. So what did that do?
So that one pushed the freeze even further all the way to 2026.
Wow.
But unlike the 42nd Amendment this time, they gave a specific reason.
Yeah.
It was to encourage states to work towards population stabilization,
Okay.
aligning with the national population policy.
Makes sense.
So the idea was states that are doing well with family planning, they shouldn't be punished by losing seats.
Right.
They
To put in the effort.
put in the effort.
Yeah, so for the past 5 decades, every election, national or state level, has been based on that 1971 census data.
Yeah, it's a long time.
That's a long time.
And analyses like the ones in the Indian Express, they point out that this freeze hasn't actually led to, everyone stabilizing their population growth across the country.
Right.
So these differences in how fast populations are growing in different regions, they've just been getting bigger during this time.
Which leads us to, those tensions that we talked about, the whole north-south divide when it comes to delimitation based on more current numbers.
Exactly. And there's a really important perspective from Alistair Macmillan's work.
Okay.
Specifically, his chapter in Redistricting in Comparative Perspective, published by Oxford University Press.
Okay.
And he talks about this huge difference in population growth rates between North and South states from the 2001 census to the estimates for 2026.
Yeah.
That contrast is like the heart of this whole debate.
So give us some concrete numbers for the listeners, to really drive this point home. How big are these differences?
Okay, so Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand,
Yeah.
they're looking at population increases between 2001 and 2026 of like 55.33% and 51.4%.
This huge.
It's huge. And then you have states like Bihar and Jharkhand. They're usually grouped in with this high growth category.
Okay.
But then look at the South.
Yeah.
Tamil Nadu projected to be way lower, like around 15.5% increase during that same period.
Wow.
Maharashtra about 28% and Karnataka 24.2%.
But there's a real disparity there.
Oh, yeah.
So if delimitation happened right now based on these numbers, what would happen to the Lok Sabha seats? How would it shake out between North and South?
So the Indian Express has highlighted this, the almost inevitable consequence is that the South would likely lose seats in the Lok Sabha and the North would gain seats.
Makes sense.
And that potential shift in power that's the root of the rift and all the anxiety that's being discussed.
It really makes you think about fairness and representation.
For sure.
But remember that phrase in Article 81(2, so far as practicable?
Yeah.
How has that actually played out in practice?
Right. That phrase is super important. It's allowed for some flexibility moving away from a purely mathematical ratio.
Okay.
Like look at Goa.
Yeah.
Population about 1.5 million people, but they have 2 MPs.
Okay.
Delhi, on the other hand.
Yeah.
33.8 million people, and they only have 7 MPs.
Wow.
And a lot of northeastern states, they tend to have more representation in parliament compared to their population size.
It seems like the folks who wrote the Constitution, while they were going for proportional representation, they maybe didn't see this kind of demographic shift coming.
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp observation.
Thanks.
The differences in growth rates we're seeing now, they're massive.
Yeah.
Maybe bigger than what the framers imagined.
Right.
And this brings up some really fundamental questions that are being debated right now.
Yeah.
Do we need a bigger parliament?
Mm.
Maybe go beyond the current 543 or the max 550?
Right.
Do states need more MLAs to really represent their growing population?
Yeah, it's a natural thought process. More people, more representatives.
Yeah.
But the analyses we've been looking at, particularly in the Indian Express, they offer a counter-argument.
They do?
What's the logic there?
So they're saying that our experience over the last 30 years shows that just adding more people to the legislatures
Doesn't automatically mean better laws or a smoother process.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're arguing that even if we had like 700 MPs or something in recent years,
But it's not a guarantee of better governance.
it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
They see quality of debate and the process itself as more important than just sheer numbers.
And there are also some very practical drawbacks to having a supersized legislature.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about symbolism.
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest is the cost.
Right.
More MPs, MLAs, that means more money spent on housing infrastructure, salaries, allowances, all that stuff.
Of course.
And the article we're talking about, it points out that this huge increase in spending, it doesn't come with any promise of better laws, more productive debates, or better governance.
We're paying more, but you're not necessarily getting more.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it could also impact the executive branch, the Council of Ministers.
Oh, yeah. Under Article 75, 1A of the Constitution, the size of the Council of Ministers is capped at 15% of the Lok Sabha.
Okay.
So a much bigger Lok Sabha could mean a really big cabinet, maybe even 90 to 100 ministers.
Wow.
Same 15% rule applies in most states, and the worry is that bigger cabinets don't always mean better administration or more effective solutions to India's problems.
Yeah, it could get unwieldy.
They could get really hard to manage.
So considering all these challenges, the analysis we've been focusing on, it offers a different approach, right?
It does.
It's more pragmatic. It says, let's just freeze the number of seats
Exactly.
in parliament and state assemblies.
That's the key takeaway.
So what's the main reason behind this idea to freeze things? What's the thinking there?
So they're saying that the idea of population proportionality, while it sounds fair in theory, it's become really difficult to put into practice, and it could actually divide the country because of those demographic changes we've been talking about.
Right.
They suggest amending Articles 81 and 82 and other related parts of the Constitution to basically freeze the current size of Parliament and the state assemblies, no matter what future censuses say.
That's a big step away from how things are set up now, readjusting after each census.
Yeah, it is.
And the article even quotes Otto von Bismarck, talking about the art of the possible.
Right.
How does that fit?
That quote, politics is the art of the possible, the attainable, the art of the next best. They use that to frame this idea of freezing seats as a practical solution to a problem that could cause a lot of conflict.
Okay.
The point is that a new delimitation that really changes the balance of power between states could lead to a lot of unrest, especially in the South, where they're projected to lose seats.
So it's about putting the unity and stability of the country ahead of a strict by-the-numbers approach that might cause more problems than it solves.
That's the core idea.
So the message is united India, not just a bigger parliament.
Exactly.
And they're calling for a cap on Sabha members, maybe around 550.
Right.
And moving away from using population as the only factor in how seats are allocated.
Yeah.
This has been a super insightful deep dive into a really complex issue, and it's especially relevant for you, our listeners, who are prepping for UPSC exams. We've covered the constitutional basis for delimitation, the historical reasons for the freeze, the demographic differences between North and South, the challenges of applying strict population proportionality, and the potential downsides of just adding more lawmakers, and finally, this argument for freezing seats to keep the country united.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have, and the big takeaway is that there's this tension between the ideal of representation based on population and the reality of uneven growth across India.
That's the heart of the matter.
And this proposal to freeze the number of seats, while it's a departure from how things have been done, it's presented as a way to deal with a sensitive issue and put national unity first.
It's about finding a workable solution.
So for you, our listeners, especially those hitting the books for UPSC, you got to understand this delimitation debate inside and out.
It's essential.
It's about current affairs,
Federalism.
the very principles of our Constitution, all super important for your mains papers.
Absolutely.
And we've talked about the historical amendments, the specific articles in the Constitution, all key for your prelims.
Can't forget those.
Now, this brings us to a question for you to think about.
Yeah. What do you think?
Given all these complexities, all the potential political fallout, what do you believe are the most important factors that should shape the future of representation in India?
Big question.
It is.
No easy answers.
No easy answers, and we want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
If you found this deep dive helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and leave a comment with any questions you have or your own perspective on this issue.
We love hearing from you.
Your engagement helps us keep this conversation going and dig deeper into these important topics. And just to be clear, the main source for our discussion today was the fantastic analysis from the Indian Express.
Top-notch reporting.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
See you soon.